So you weren't expecting that.
Was John? Were you clapping, John?
Absolutely. It's great. So I'm going to also to say, go on, John. Let me also say that we're about to see some material this afternoon as well that has some music directed by Johnny Patrick, and Johnny Patrick is also here. And I've been told that you're going to keep Paul on your best behaviour. Is that right, John? Go on, wave for the audience. They can see where you are. Give him a clap as well, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. And you were saying that both of you go back a long way in your union connections. Right. Okay. Well, just shout out at any point you need to, John. That's fine. If it's wrong.
Yeah. I was shop steward at ATV, and John was the chairman, weren't you, John? The chairman, musician union. And so that was a good relationship as well. And then later on, when I became a director, that was when I was a cameraman.
Yeah, sure.
And when I became a director, I worked with John on different programs, mainly The Golden Shot, and then New Faces.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to take you back a bit in your career as it were before those days. First of all, I noticed on your emails you call yourself Paul Laing. Is the Stewart added just for kind of theatricality and avoiding replication of somebody else's name?
No, you must have Googled, because if you Google the name, up comes a strange sheet where there's a guy who turns out it's my cousin, and he tells the story, which I can tell now. When I was doing the New Faces programme, Derek Hobson got a letter, and he phoned me up and said, "I've got this letter, does it mean anything to you?" And he read this thing out to me, and I just burst into tears. But I do that quite a lot, almost anything. And years and years ago, my grandfather was killed in 1912 or something by a lorry. His wife had two children, my father and my aunt, and they were taken away from her by what we called the Laing sisters. They were really gross people, and they thought she wasn't fit to bring the children up. I was brought up, just to truncate the story, I was brought up to believe that my grandmother was dead. I never had a grandmother. My father told me his mother had died a long time ago. So it meant absolutely nothing. I mean, I hadn't got a grandmother. This letter was sent over to me then by Derek, and got a taxi to bring it to me, and I really couldn't believe that. I phoned this number, there was a phone number on it in London, and what happened was this lady who had remarried, she'd seen my name on The Golden Shot, and she said to her two daughters, she had three daughters, one of them was then in South Africa, and she said to the daughters, "He's something to do with me because I got Paul Stewart Laing, and my father was Geoffrey Stewart Laing." So they said, "No, that was stupid, it's just a coincidence." So she didn't do anything about it. But then when New Faces came on, she saw the name again, and she kept seeing this name, and she thought, I'm going to do something, I'm going to write, but she didn't tell her children, her daughters, her grown-up daughters. So she wrote this letter to Derek. I phoned her up, and then I went to see her, and it was my grandmother. And it was just because she'd seen the name. And the reason that it was Paul Stewart Laing was because when I first became a director, I was about to put my first credit up, and a Paul Laing appeared at the BBC, spelt exactly the same, and he was a sports director. And I thought, oh, what am I going to do? And luckily I had the Stewart, so I said Paul Stewart Laing. And I know it sounds a pretentious name, but it's one that over the years turned out okay,
no,
because people remembered it.
Absolutely, it sticks in the memory, doesn't it? It has
that sticks, yeah.
A very good effect. Yeah. So let's just take you back a little. I know that before you became a director and a producer, you were a cameraman. Is that where you started as a cameraman?
Yeah.
Is that your kind of...
Yeah. I was at what's now Aston University College of Technology. I was a student apprentice with GEC. After the second year, I failed my exams. I was in the drama group there. I liked being involved in drama. And I thought, what the hell am I going to do? Because I didn't want to go home. I didn't like my father. And I needed to get a job. So I worked, I don't know if you know the firm, I worked for a firm called Chamberlain and Hookham in Birmingham. And it assembles electric meters. And I used to spend my time on the assembly line doing bang. And I thought, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And it was a horrendous place, because I don't know if you do know it, but it's right next to a curing place for leather. All these cow hides and everything. The stink from them was awful. But they used to overcome that because they used to like eating stew sandwiches at lunchtime, the people I was working with. Anyway, I left
the
there.
old-fashioned Birmingham that's long gone, I suspect, actually, Paul.
I would imagine so.
It's all we yuppies now with mobile phones, I can assure you.
Yeah. Well, I left there and I went to work for Joseph Lucas as a sales delivery clerk. And again, I was in their drama group, and I thought, oh God, is this going to be my life? And I saw in the Sunday Mercury an article on what I thought was an expansion of Aston television studios. It was a big cover. They'd redone the front of the studios. So I wrote to them saying, I'd always wanted to be a director, and probably the best way to start was to be a cameraman.
Yeah.
Got any jobs? They wrote back and said, no, but we'll put your letter on file. So that was that. I thought that would be the end of that. About 6 months later, I got an invitation to go for an interview. I went for the interview, and the only thing I really remember from it was that they asked me, what did I know what a cameraman did? And I said, well, no, not really. They just sit behind the camera and get driven around and take shots. And they said, well, no, there's a bit more to it than that. They must have asked me some other questions. I remember they asked me about did I know what foreground and background was. They were obviously getting desperate for something I could know something about. And as I was going out, a guy called Jeff Collins, who was the head of cameras then, said to me, could I suggest if you go for a job like this again, you read up something about it? And so I thought...
So you weren't optimistic then, really, were you?
I certainly wasn't. And I thought that was it. Well, obviously, the other candidates must have been real duds. Because about a month later, I got a letter inviting me to join them as a trainee cameraman, and that's how I started.
And was that working for ATV or ABC? Or?
It was for Alpha. Alpha Television was ATV Monday to Friday. Then it's like LWT became with Thames in London. So it was Monday to Friday, and about 7 o'clock, I think, it changed over to ABC. And so the rest of the Friday night was ABC, and the weekends, Saturday and Sunday was ABC. So that's what Alpha was. Alpha was a company set up by ATV and ABC.
So effectively, probably, even though you were the kind of technical crew, if you like, probably your bosses then would change depending on what day of the week it was. So you might have Mark Stewart one day or someone entirely different the next.
Especially with the ABC side of it, because we did see the ATV people because they had the offices in Edmund Street, but the ABC people deigned to come down or up or whatever it is from London, and they would come up with their production team, and we would just be like. Nowadays, you'd just be considered a facility, and that's what we were. We were a facility at the weekend. So something like Thank You Lucky Stars, that the production team came up for that. All the rest of the stuff, the design and everything was made in London, and they shipped it all.
Right. Yeah. So talk me through as a cameraman how you would make a music show like Thank You Lucky Stars. I mean, nowadays they would rehearse it to death, I imagine. But what was it like, doing it live as well?
Oh, it's great because it's more interesting now for me looking back because I've started putting together my memories of things.
Yeah.
For my kids, I'm putting it all together, and I keep checking up dates and things. And I was there when the Beatles first made their first appearance because I started with Alpha in 1961. That's when I first started as a cameraman. I was 20, 21, something like that. It was great because it's completely different to how it is now. There were no entourages with artists. You all mingled in together while you were rehearsing one act. The other acts would be down there chatting and talk away, and it was just very informal. In fact, the very first time I ever saw an entourage, I used to come in the morning because I was very junior. I'd come in the morning, you'd set the cameras up, and of course it was black and white as well, put the lenses on the cameras, get them ready for the rehearsal, then go up to the canteen for a cup of tea. I went up to the canteen this one day, and there was a whole table full of people who looked as if they'd killed a wolf pack. And this was in the summer, and they were just all sitting there drinking their tea, and thought, who the hell's that? I looked on the running order, thought it must be a group. No, it wasn't a group. So we went down and started rehearsing, and we used to just block each of the acts And one of the things to remember about Lucky Stars, which actually was pretty bad for me learning as a cameraman, because if the microphone was in the way of a shot, the cameraman would shout to you, I was an assistant, and move the microphone back or forward or whatever so you could get a clean shot. And that was because they mined. Of course, years later, when I started moving microphones, things were live, and they weren't that keen then, and the microphone would get stuck back in their face. Anyway, have I lost the thread of what I was saying? Oh yeah, and so we rehearsed 2 of the acts, and then they set in 2 stools, and these 2 of the wolves came down, and the other wolves came with them and took their coats off, and it was Sonny and Cher. And but I fell in love because she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, I think, in a television studio. And I was on the camera that day, on camera 3, and I was the one. I took all these profile shots of her and panning around, and I just thought she was fantastic. But that was the very first time I ever saw an entourage. I mean, the Beatles came. I don't even know whether Epstein came with them. They would just come, they'd chat to you, you knew all about what they were going to do the second time they came, when they were going to go to America, and they just talked to you about it. Nowadays, you'd have to get past 16 people. You know, my 2 sons are cameramen, and they have an entirely different view of the way television works. And they wouldn't be able to just talk with, the Rolling Stones or the Beatles or Jerry and the Paper or whoever. And that was another thing. When they came, the Beatles came 1 week. A couple of weeks later, Jerry and the Pacemakers, and we knew they would be big. Beatles we didn't think much of. Well, the next time came, you couldn't get into the studio for the Beatles. I've got a little story about them as well. The second time they came back, they wanted to. They knew that there'd be a crowd. Producer Philip Jones knew that there'd be a crowd of people outside, so he got me to put a camera. Well, he didn't get me. The senior cameraman told me to put a camera outside on the building outside, and I was the one to man it. And I was told that when the Beatles arrived, there'd be 2 or 3 cars, and they would be followed by a van. The Beatles would be in the cars in the middle of the setup. And it's funny, I was writing this up a couple of weeks ago, my memory of it, and I've often told the story about how I'd set on the camera. They told me on talkback they're coming, because they came around, up by the HP Source Factory, came around the corner. I saw them coming round, they pulled up, and I was ready on the cars. Now this was on lenses, we didn't have zooms then, no zoom lens, and out of the corner of my eye I saw something was happening behind them, and I pulled the camera up, at which point the Beatles ran into shot and ran into the studio, and the crowds came over the road, and it was, bedlam. And that was the story that I told. And I went on, I don't know what I Googled, but I was amazed last week to find that shot. It's there are 3 Lucky Stars that exist.
That's right.
And one of them is the Beatles Liverpool special.
Yeah.
And on it, Brian Matthews says, and blah blah blah, the Beatles. Have a look at what happened earlier today, and there was my shot. And
I wish I'd known that, or we'd have found the shot out as well. We would. How difficult? I mean, obviously, we think of cameras now as being so small you could almost walk around with them, on your palm of your hand.
Yeah.
How difficult was it to get those cameras to give you good shots?
Oh well, they were big cameras for a start on. You had 4 lenses on them, 2, 3, 5, and 8-inch lens. In their day, they were the cutting edge. They were Marconi Mark III cameras, and the one thing you didn't want to happen on them was that there were 4 screws, they're called here, and inside over the lenses there was a great big circle, big glass circle, and that was a filter that I think had about 3 stops on it that the engineers could manoeuvre. They could, sitting in the control room, they could activate that so that they could change the stops within, a variation. Sure. And if they've got a hair or a bit of dirt on it, like in film when they, they check the gate, the cameraman, senior cameraman, say, take the front off, and you take everything off, and it's a hell of a way. Take it off, take the circlip off, take the glass thing off, clean it, put it on, probably put it on the wrong way round, so that instead of it going dark to light, it went light to dark. Then you'd have to say, oh, that's fine. So that, but they were the camera pictures. I mean, you can see on. I mean, I hadn't even thought about it till you just said it. But looking at the pictures of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones on there, they look pretty good pictures now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, living this on the fact there were 4 or 5 lines, so you got less line definition. I mean, the actual images were great. It just struck me that when you watch a lot of old television, that there were a lot more, it seems to me anyway, close-ups. And almost because of making use of focusing sometimes to take from foreground to background. You know, so you were making the best of the fact you couldn't move the cameras around as quickly, you know, or indeed edit the pictures as well as they can nowadays as well.
Do you mean edit on the day, the vision mixer cutting?
Either live or indeed in post-production.
Well, there was no post-production, of course, because tape was... first of all, there wasn't any post-production initially when I went in. Then it came in with the 2-inch tape, and that was so expensive. I think it was like 200 quid a roll or something. You had to get permission from Lou Grade or whoever before you could ever cut a tape. So they were never edited. Programs where you'd either start again if something had gone wrong and do the whole thing again.
Did you find the experience it gave you of doing live TV? Or was really valuable to you when you became a producer?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the things I sort of specialised in then were programmes that were either live or as live. So Golden Shot was live, and then it was done as live when it stopped being put out live. New Faces we did as live. We'll probably talk about that in a bit.
Yeah, sure.
And the artists were always warned, once you start, that's it. You know, that little girl they had on, was it the X Factor or no? But Britain's Got Talent. She wouldn't, with us, she would never have had a second chance.
Sure.
They were all born.
How did you become involved in the union?
I was thinking about this the other day as to why and what happened, because I was not a political sort of person when I first went into television. I think I objected to having to join a union. It was a closed shop and you had to join ACTT to be a cameraman. Then once I was in, there were lots of things that seemed unfair. And then there was a guy who was the shop steward at ACTT. He was an engineer, and engineers and cameramen are mortal enemies. I think that goes back to tradition, isn't it? In the BBC, the engineers were the cameramen when it first started. I think they always they didn't like the fact that cameramen took over the responsibility for being creative. Anyway, I've diverted myself.
No, I'm just intrigued, you know, because as you said, I mean, from what little I've got to know of you, I wouldn't have classified you maybe as being stereotypical of what you would expect a union shop steward to be, because you went up to become a director of programme.
John, I was bolshy, wasn't I? Yep. We did, and one of the things that I do remember from the time was that management were rubbish. I mean, the quality of management, they caused more problems. We actually solved more problems. I mean, I'll give you an example of how the company felt about us. I became the vice president of ACTT, and Lou Gray sent me a telegram congratulating me and saying, and if there are any problems with getting out to do things, contact my office. He knew the value of unions, and each of us had a relationship with Lou. I can only talk for ATV. He knew that we sometimes we bloody double-minded, but more often than not, we just wanted to have smooth running. I mean, for instance, when colour, I'm jumping ahead a bit, when colour television came in, the company wanted everybody to be tested for colour blindness. Now that sounds like a reasonable thing to do, because if you're an engineer and you can't tell red from green or whatever, but my first question to the management then was, well, what are you going to do if they fail it? And they didn't have an answer to it. And I said, well, then they're not going to take the test. And that's the sort of thing we made them do. When we moved into the new building in Scotland, isn't it? Paradise Centre, what's its name as well? Paradise, where we went to. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
right, yeah.
When we went in there were lots of problems they hadn't sorted out. And one day, I threatened, because I was in a position where I just say, right, we're going to come out if you don't sort this out. And I was in a meeting one day, again, just to show you what Lou Grade thought. The whole management were all lined up across one side of the table with a guy called, I can't think of his name at the moment, Cliff Fox was the manager of the studios then. He was lined up with all his other managers, and there was myself, and I always had somebody else with me who wasn't allowed to talk, but he was there to make sure that nobody could go back and say I'd sold anybody out or whatever. And we're truncheon on about something. Suddenly the door opens, in comes Lou Gray with Bill Ward, who was the head of, I'm not sure if he was then, I think he was the head of Light Entertainment then, or head of production. They'd come down from Elstree, he came straight over to me, he said, that's the one we want. Out you come. He took us outside, we went into a dressing room. He did one of his, I don't know if you, those of you that are really interested in telly will know that Lou's got this, my word is my bond, never writes anything down. He said, what is it you wanted? I told him what the basis of the problem was. He said, well, we'll sort that, said whatever it was. We shook hands and he went off. I went back into this meeting. Now, he hadn't even addressed the managers. And I sat down to carry on, and I just said, there's no point carrying on the meeting, because they had absolutely no authority. Yeah. They had nothing about them. It was really sad, really. But I imagine a similar thing would happen with John. The only people that weren't very good in the sense of using their strength were the NUJ. We always felt that the NUJ, because they were journalists and they could do stories. They would do stories about people in the motor industry, red robbing and all this stuff, and they would put us in the same category. Yeah. And so they would take the benefits, but they wouldn't ever really come out.
It's interesting you're talking about that with the fact that you negotiated so long, because I mean there were several quite significant strikes in ITV's history. It was about 1961, I think, wasn't it? And there was one big one in 1979 as well. I mean, presumably there had been a lot of behind-the-scenes work to try and stop that happening before you got that far.
I led the first strike. We had a negotiating committee within ACTT. I can't remember the actual date. It was more like 67, 68, I think, the first big strike.
I don't know much about. Oh right, yeah. Okay, I'm a different one entirely then. Thanks, Louis.
But there hadn't been a strike of technicians.
Sure.
And George Elvin was the general secretary of our union. Now he'd been the general secretary of the film union, which was the ACT, which became the ACTT when they took over and claimed the television technicians. So they were added to the film technicians.
Sure. And
George was a really nice man, but he was about my age that I am now, and but a bit more stooped. And he was one of these who liked to go into corridors, and I don't know if John ever had negotiations like this. I couldn't stand it. If you'd say, I'll invent something now, we want 10%, and George would say, yeah, okay, we'll tell them 10%, but really we'd settle for 8, wouldn't we? And some foolish people would say yes. George would then go out and meet with the managers, or their negotiator, in a corridor. He'd come back and he'd say, you know that 8% we said we'd accept? Well, they're a bit difficult with that. They'd go for 5%. How would 5% be? And you'd say, well, yeah, that would be, okay, we'll have 5%. And you'd go out and you'd come back and say, that 5%. And anyway, you get down to 2%. And, well, I couldn't stand that. And so this one day, we were in negotiations, I can't remember how many of us are on the negotiating committee. It was like one person from each of the ITV companies, roughly. And we sat in the room. We'd been over to the ITCA, which was the management structure that negotiated on behalf of all the ITV companies. We sat with them. They were pretty obdurate. They weren't going to move. We went back into our meeting and agreed around the table that we weren't going to move, and we weren't going to let George go into the corridor. I proposed a motion that if they didn't immediately give us a response, we pull the plug, which meant we pull commercials. So we went back into the meeting. We came back outside. They turned us down. We sat down, and I said, well, they turned us down. So George started talking and sort of trying to smooth it and say, well, we can sort this out. I went outside and phoned up a guy called John Bunyan, who was the shop steward at Anglia Television, and I said, we've agreed to pull the plug, pull the commercials. So I went back into the meeting, and suddenly all hell broke loose. The managers came in, they asked for George. George went out. He didn't know anything about this. He went outside, came back in and said, the strikers started a strike. And I said, well, isn't that what we agreed? And that was the start of it. And then what happened was, they wouldn't put the commercials back on, so the management at Anglia told people that they were sacked, and then that became a chain reaction. Again, you couldn't do anything remotely like that now, because there was only ITV in those days. The BBC was completely different. They had a gentleman's union, didn't they? I can't think what it's called now. ABS, that's it. And that was how that strike started.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. We alluded to this kind of at the Bob Monkhouse event last year. I mean, you and Bob clashed quite famously on politics, didn't you, really, at first?
Yep.
And you actually became very big friends later.
Oh, yeah.
How did that kind of pan out?
Well, when I was a cameraman, I would just sit on my pedestal waiting for the next shot to come. This is one I've a bit more experienced by now.
Yeah, sure.
And he hated it. And then every now and then I'd call. I'd say every now and then, once in a while, we'd call a meeting for some reason or other, and he hated that. And again, it's this friendly thing, because we all knew each other and we all talked to each other. Again, now that doesn't happen on the equivalent sort of show. They won't just be chatting with the cameraman. And when Bob heard that Francis Essex, who was the head of Light Entertainment, wanted me to direct one of his shows. In fact, we did the last of his golden shots. Bob was horrified, but we had a meeting, and he realised that that was all an act, and I was now a director. And one of the things I'd learned, I never really had any sympathy for artists when I was a cameraman. I just thought they were overpaid people, and that they had nothing to contribute. And of course I realised once I was a director, and certainly when I was a producer, that they, unlike the rest of us behind the camera, they get one go at it, and they're up on the screen, and if it doesn't work or people don't like them, that's the end of their career. And so some of them were quite hard in what they wanted.
Yeah.
I used to think that was because they were spoiled, but it wasn't. It was because, like somebody like Charlie Drake, who everybody thought was an obnoxious person, horrible person. Charlie Drake was somebody who I learned he knew exactly what he wanted, and if you didn't get it, then he didn't want to work with you. But if you did, he was great.
Yeah. You worked with, was it Slapstick and Old Lace?
Slapstick and Old Lace, that was the thing I did as a trainee, yeah. But yeah, so Bob, I became almost like one of the family, really, because I did so many things with him after that.
No, have a quick look at a bit of the golden shot here. I don't think it wasn't one that you directed, but Johnny was certainly doing the music.
Yeah.
So we found a musical bit for John as well here. We did. And you might have been the cameraman possibly on this. See if it brings you back in your memories. I think it's Rolf Harris we have. I think.
Two little boys from Rolf Harris. Two little boys had two little toys.
Each had a wooden horse. Gaily they played each summer's day. Warriors both, of course. One little chap then had a mishap, broke off his horse's head. He wept for his toy, then cried with joy as his young playmate said, "Do you think I would leave you crying when there's room on my horse for two? Climb up here, Jack, and don't be crying."
Now, what intrigues me about the Golden Shot is that, because I always assume it was all live, because you would expect that with a documentary show, but often those musical inserts were not always live.
They were never live.
Yeah, absolutely.
We used to record them in the morning. There'd be two musical acts, and they were recorded in the morning. I think, did we do the band call the night before? That was... Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's funny, I actually did when you said Rolf Harris, but
Yeah.
it obviously wasn't that one. I did a Rolf Harris on the Golden Shot, and I used to like taking risks and things sometimes as well. And on that one, Rolf Harris, and this we did it when we recorded it as live. You had Rolf up foreground singing his song, and he appeared at the back as well. Now this is, I mean, the sort of thing now they do it just like that. But the engineers and everybody really cooperated. We did him against Blue, obviously, for the second bit. He walked down and he had a camera. I don't remember what the song was about, and he handed the camera to himself. It was obviously just out of shot, and the floor manager gave him the camera. And it was a really clever thing, and I thought, oh, I'm going to see that. But it was a different one.
Sadly, I don't think it exists,
No,
unfortunately.
yeah,
I mean, there are so few of them left, unfortunately, which is the big shame.
I'd imagine that was a Norman Vaughan one, because I did all the Norman Vaughan
Yes, that's like you.
Golden Shots.
Obviously, I mean, there's all kind of anecdotes about the Golden Shot, and I said most of them don't exist. I mean, did you work on these shows where the so-called vicar and the exploding light bulb was
all rubbish.
And the guy in the Rumbelows window?
Rubbish. It couldn't happen. I mean, I'm amazed that... I'm amazed that Bob got away with telling these stories, because you only got to think about it. Bob used to tell the story, for those that don't know, about a guy, and funny enough, he'd always tell it as if it was a brummie. And he'd say that, hello, and do all the brummy voice and everything, and
yes.
I can't see it. Oh, he'd turn the telly off, or he'd do variations on this story. And Bob would say, I said to him, what do you mean they turn the telly off? Or somebody's walked in front of the telly. And he said, well, I'm in the coin box on the corner, and I'm looking at Rumbelows.
Yeah.
And this story gained credence, and people believed it. In the same way, the other story is about how one of the arrows, or the bolts, nearly killed somebody. It wasn't possible. All those guns, the crossbows,
Burning the bolt.
they had, but funny enough, he's in New Zealand at the moment. One of the Bernies. They had things on them that you couldn't move it left or right. But there were these myths. Bob was great at creating a myth.
Absolutely. That's part of the theatricality of television, really, isn't it?
Well, and part of the theatricality of Bob.
And why did they end up, and how did they manage to end up in a situation where they were recording entire shows of Golden Shot and then broadcasting them as live? I mean, how do you physically do it when you've got audiences being encouraged to ring in or whatever? I mean, I never quite understood why they were recording in the first place.
Oh no, they were all live at first. For years and years. They were live at Alpha, which which is when I first worked on it, and they were live for part of the time at the new studios. But the reason that they stopped being live was because the IRA kept phoning up and with bomb threats. When you got a bomb threat, they had to clear the studio. So the first thing that was attempted was to have people, the contestants, come in and be in different rooms in the building, and still as if they were phoning in.
Yeah.
And that didn't really work. And it was because that killed really the sort of life of the Golden Shot. Because up until then, if something went wrong, it went over. Or you suddenly stopped it. I remember a Norman Vaughan one where we ran out of time, and the following week when it started, I thought, I know what we'll do. And we had Norman with a piece of cloth over him. He objected to this, and Spike Mullins, his writer, objected as well and said that's not what a star should be doing. And I said no, but that's how we're going to start the show. And it started with a cleaner just walking past, no, just dusting, took the cloth off and walked away, and Norman carried on as if it was the previous. And that was to do the final shot.
Yeah,
and then once that was out of the way, we then started.
It's a great
idea. I had a few good ideas.
You have many good ideas.
and it then went on with the show. Norman wasn't very good at. He was good at ad-libbing in a sort of club type atmosphere, but he wasn't very good on a show. But of course he was an expert as compared to poor old Charlie Williams, who followed.
And had real issues. Now it must have been around that time when you started working as a producer director that you actually started doing New Faces. And I'm going to change the order here, Mark, slightly, those clips, if you can drag out a New Faces clip for us. I mean, talent shows now are seen as the biggest thing in the world, aren't they? Britain's got the X Factor, or most of it, as it were. I mean, was New Faces as big as it was at the time? How did it start?
Oh yeah, it was. And I mean, just to start off the talk by saying who it created. I mean, we discovered Lenny Henry, Victoria Wood. I mean, they're two of the what you call national treasures now, aren't they? They've survived. Marty Kane, who was, I think she then went on to become the host of New Faces when it came back. And my favourites was Shawadi Wadi, but still around in some. Oh, really? Yeah, they were from Leicester, two groups of Leicester who got put together. But that was another interesting thing, because the show came from Australia. Bruce Gingell, who was the deputy managing director at the time, brought the idea into Francis Essex and said, we should be doing this. Francis said okay, because it went on to America to become the Gong Show, and a guy called Dickie Lehman directed a pilot, and it's really funny because it wasn't done. They gave him no production budget. Dickie was one of the old style directors. He'd been I don't know if he'd been in vaudeville, but that's the sort of feel that's where he came from. My generation were the ones that then were in the middle of that, and then the lot they have now are the ones who came on. And bloody Ada, what was I?
Dickie Lehman, New Faces.
Oh yeah, and he had 6 acts, and they were sort of dotted around, and they each did their thing, but one of them blew up a hot water bottle, and blew it up until it burst, and I thought, that's not an act. And anyway, Francis didn't like it, and he then asked Les Cox and I to take over, and I'll say what we then started to do, but bizarrely, I can recall on Britain's Got Talent, I don't know if it was one of the auditions, there was a bloke blowing up a bloody hot water bottle. Whether it's the same guy or his son, I don't know.
Let's have a little look behind the scenes of New Faces.
Oh, right.
A face that you might recognise here on the screen.
Director, you set the scenes. How do you deal with an artist that maybe has a very definite idea himself of how his act should be presented?
That tends not to happen. Can I just tell you what happens when I know who's going to be on the show, and then perhaps can explain why that doesn't happen? what happens is I get the list of names that Les is going to book onto the show. I'll then phone them up, talk about the number that they're going to do. I never talk to them about the setting, because I think for people that have not appeared in television before, it's an unnecessary complication for them to get involved in. All I would talk about is advising them as to whether or not to wear certain colours in their clothes, the sort of more or less technical problems.
The best thing to remember on the night is when you're up there in front of the audience, what usually happens is Derek Upson will say a now company, give you a bit of a spiel, a bit of a build-up. And then there'll be audience who will applause. Now leave it a few seconds before you start. And
George will.
Well, you tell them all that. Yeah. But the important thing is to be thinking of the tempo to yourself, you know. Yeah. Okay, here we go then.
That's Phil.
It's not like
That is the most incredible documentary.
It's good, isn't it?
That you gave us. I mean, one of the earliest recordings I've ever seen, actually, about 1974.
Yeah, that was
real insight into how New Faces is made.
That was made by the guy who used to do the Benny Hill shows. Really went into it, and it's interesting because those of you that I don't know who've seen it, but
we're going to show it in the bar a bit later.
Right.
After people want to watch the whole program,
because it shows how we used to audition, and we didn't then make fools of them. And lots of people, I think they say it on there, they turned up at auditions knowing they weren't going to get on, but they wanted to just do an audition. And you asked whether it was a big show. We do things like auditions at the Palladium, and there were queues outside. We were a front page story when we had, what was the name of the girl? She then went on into Emmerdale.
Melandra Burrows?
Melandra Burrows.
Yeah.
She was, we never had, well, we tried not to have children, and we put her on, and she won, and a lot of people objected to that. That was a front page story in the Sun. So that's the sort of, I don't know, power's the wrong word. But of course, what we were interested in was promoting the artists. What they're interested in now is promoting the panel.
I think that the power of what you did shows. I mean, the success you had in helping us with Lenny Henry last year, but because you were still talking to him all those years later, you still knew him, and we couldn't get past his age.
Right.
But you still had that kind of hotline to people.
Yeah.
That must give you a great sense of achievement.
It does, but I've never, other than Bob, I've never, it's only me personal, but then me that's talking, isn't it? I've never been friendly with any of the artists in the sense of having a relationship away from the studio. I just go home and it's just like it was a job. But it's a wonderful job, you know. I had it from 61 till whenever I retired. And probably the same as John in his field. Every day you actually wanted, you look forward to going to the studio. There were very few days when you didn't like it. It was a wonderful job, and a wonderful business to be in.
Now, you mentioned Shawadi Wadi earlier because, of course, you kind of took, or initially thought about taking some elements of New Faces into Celebrity Square.
Yeah.
I mean, you were best known working with Bob Manco's for Celebrity Square. So it's really, I mean, you own that show, Lock, Stock and Barrel, really, as a show in your ATV.
Yeah. Again, the original idea Francis had, you see, the Golden Shot had that format where it was a bit of quiz, a music act, a bit of quiz. They took that from the Palladium, where the Palladium was the act's first part, the middle section of it was the big clock, and then it was the top of the bill, and sort of the Golden Shot was formed in that sort of way. And when we did the pilot for Celebrity Squares, Francis wanted us to put a musical act in, and I thought, well, it doesn't really work like that. But anyway, I did it, and I recorded Shawadi Wadi and Sweet Sensation. They were the other music act we had. They had a big hit as well, with a song called Sad Sweet Dreamer, I think it was. And so I recorded them, did the pilots and put the music in, and it didn't work. And Francis, to his credit, immediately said, no, it doesn't work. And in fact, you know that I've got the two pilots.
Yes, which we hope we'll restore and transfer to you one day. They
were never shown. They've never been seen.
Yeah. And that's a fascinating piece of archive history, really.
Right.
In that sense, the fact they've survived as well. It's incredible. But I mean, as a show, it was, an amazing format. I mean, it's been remade since. made in the 1990s as well.
Yeah. But there's an uncredited person on it. I mean, I made a joke earlier when John was signing something, and I signed that program.
Yeah.
There was his name was on the Golden Shopper. A guy called Dennis Burson. He was a writer, and he was really the genius behind lots of the gags on Celebrity Squares. Because of course we had the myth going around that the artists all made up their little funnies, and of course that wasn't true. Very few of them. I don't think we ever trusted any of them to make up. The questions were geared to pick out some salacious bit of comment, so that Diana Dawes could say something about Figston's Peculiar, and those were the sort of things that we then had the gag, and I would then brief them, and I was the only one who did it, so that the secret, as it were, never got out. Well, people guessed, but nobody could ever really know. And the one person who was always credited with being so clever was Willie Rushton, and Dennis wrote all his stuff. But of course, because of what it was, Dennis never got a credit as a writer on the programs. I think he's a program associate.
Program associate.
Different things. But yeah, we really liked it. The program was Hollywood Squares, and the only difference that we made to it was we did a Bob spot where we did a bit where Bob would do things for answer questions for charity, and the end of the program in the American version. Whoever had won the most money at the end of the show got given the keys to a car. Well, the ITA or the ITC, I don't know which one they are, they were now the IBA, they wouldn't allow that. You had to show some skill, and we weren't sure what on earth we could do. And I remember being in the club somewhere with Bob, and we were trying to go, because Bob always got himself intimately involved in whatever he did, and so he was involved in every part of the planning of the program. And we were trying to think of a good climax to the show. And we couldn't think of one on the train back to Birmingham. And suddenly it hit me. I got there and I phoned him up, got him at the hotel, and I said, we've got 9 squares. We'll ask a question that requires 9 answers. And so we agreed to do that. But then we realised that once we were committed to it, that the only person who could say yes or no would be me. Because I had to turn the lights out, and you couldn't do questions like name 9 rivers in England, because if they said and I'd go no, the sure as eggs is eggs, there'd be a river, Zabucky or whatever it was. So it had to be things like 9 kings.
Yes.
And the only one that was ever contemporary, we had 9 types of bread for some reason, and they said bread rolls, I think was an answer, and I okayed it. Me. Somebody wrote in a letter saying it's disgraceful that you let them have that prize money. Bread rolls isn't a loaf of bread. And I always reply. I wrote a letter back saying, "Do you want their address and you tell them to give us the money back?" But it was a lovely show to work on. We enjoyed that. But that was done at Elstree, of course, Celebrity Squares. And that's why I then moved to London.
Absolutely, which brings me on to the third of our clips, I think, Mark, which is a show that never actually went out in the end, but it was an association with somebody that did go on for a very long time, Mark. We can have a look at a well-known Irish gentleman.
Wayne, you come from a totally different background to Bill here. Your dad, as I said, was a docker, like Tom's was. What did he think of you becoming a ballet dancer?
Didn't like it much. No, not at all. No, he didn't mind the tap and all that, except I used to get belted round the lugger at lunchtime, when I used to be eating my food, sort of tapping away under the table, practicing my time steps. But no, he didn't really like it. It wasn't so much that he minded it, it was sort of the ribbing that he got when he got into the doctor and said, your son's, going in those tights and everything like that. And I don't, and he'd come on and he said, why do you have to do all that, And I got the ribbing too, mind you. I mean, they say, where's your dress, and I'd say, well, you're wearing it at the moment, But, anything, but no, he didn't really like it. My mother didn't mind it, but they weren't thrilled about it, no. They're not so unhappy about it now, though.
No? What about you, Tom? Did your Your parents wanted you to stay a teacher. Were they upset that you
Originally my dad wanted me to be either a priest or a doctor. My exam results foiled both of those, and I became a teacher. And then when I started, we had 3 children.
Two people there, you worked an awful lot. Abraham and Tom and Carl.
Yeah. It's funny because you say that you can't find
that never actually went out.
That's really weird.
That was an untransmitted pilot you made.
I must have made a pilot of that then.
Yeah.
I mean, Thames, we always did do a pilot. That was the Eamon Andrews show. When it came back, it had quite a short life. And but again, he was. I loved working with him. He was just such a nice man, Eamon. But he had this one thing where he sweats. He's famous for sweating. And sometimes, even when you were recording, the makeup girl would be in, and somebody said, "We're not going to be on camera." And Wayne Sleep, he did what's the BBC chat show guy, the Yorkshireman? No, the Parkinson. He did a thing where Wayne did Olga Corbett, I think it was, and that was the first time he did a sort of thing like that, performance. And I was doing a show then with Dickie Henderson, and we'd seen it, and we said, well, we'll ask him to do the show with the thing I did called I'm Dickie, That's Show Business. Yes. And I went down to reception. They phoned up and said, Wayne Sleep had arrived, and I thought, be there with his entourage. I go down, and there's this kid with a knapsack on his back, waiting in reception. That's Wayne Sleep. And again, I sort of had a relationship with him. Well, not a relationship with him. For a long time, a long time. And of course I live in Plymouth now, and that's where he's talking about his parents, because he comes from Plymouth.
So we showed one of your This Is Your Life earlier, and there were 2 names on the end credits for lots of This Is Your Life. Why were the two directors?
Yeah, you'd always tell that the first director is the one who made the programme, and the director underneath its name was the one who did pickup. You're talking about, was that Barder?
Yeah.
So Terry Yarwood. Terry Yarwood probably did more of This Is Your Life than any other director, I think. And so you alternated week by week. So one week you do the show, but I luckily did that one. It was a 1-hour special. How
hard was it keeping that secret?
What, from Barder?
Yeah, from any of the kind of celebrities or guests.
It's really.
I mean, people talk in TV,
They do, but you had. We always use code names if that's what you want me to say, and I can't remember what Barder's was. I've got a list of all the names, so that when you talked about them, you would talk about blah blah blah. And if you were out and talking, you talked about Fred doing so and so. Fred was Eamon.
Right.
And I can't remember now the name, but he was always booked into hotels because every now and then, once one programme in a series, we would always be out and about somewhere, and we'd go into another television studio, Bristol or Norwich, Scotland, and Eamon would always be booked in under a name, and he'd be smuggled in, and then he'd stay in his suite then for the whole time we were there. He'd never come out, because the minute you saw Eamon Andrews, that was a giveaway. Yeah. But he was such a kind man.
How did the Douglas Barder project come about?
Do you know how, or you?
Well, I do, but they don't.
Right.
You see.
Yeah, I was doing so many different sorts of things, and I was working at Hendon at the RAF Museum there, and I've become friendly with the guy who, I can't remember what they call him, but anyway, the bloke who runs it, director or whatever, and he'd asked us to go through lots of their old films, this sort of thing you'd have liked, and we ran through loads and loads of film. I put together a thing which was a tribute to Bomber Command, and I was doing it with this other gent who was the sort of expert on aeroplanes and the different sounds, so you could marry up the right sound with the bit of vision. And one day we had a tea break, and we were chatting about things that I'd done, and I was then in the middle of doing This Is Your Life, and it was probably a break between the 2 series. Sure. And he said, it's funny, he said, you've never done My Father-in-Law. Why would we do your father-in-law? Who's your father-in-law? I can't remember the chap's name at the moment that I'm talking about.
Sure.
And he said, Douglas Bader. I said, they must have done Douglas Bader, because This Is Your Life was at the BBC for years and years. And they'd done, I can't remember how many before I did. I mean, I did 100 This Is Your Life. And I said, no, they must have done it. And they said, well, they didn't. I don't know, I'm sure they haven't. So, about a month later, I was in the office with Jack Crawshaw, and I said, I told him the story, and he said, they must have done it before my time. And they hadn't. And he then got out the Black Book. And the Black Book is not a book of people you don't want to do, it's a book of the family has indicated they don't want to be done. That somebody in the family, the wife or the husband or whoever, had said they don't want to be done. And Douglas Bader's name was in there, that they didn't want his life to be done. So I went back and I explained this to the guy, and he said, oh, that's strange. And he went away, spoke to Douglas Bader's wife, and came back and said, well, no, whatever the reason was, they'd be happy to do it now. And so I went back, and I think it's because I was the one then who suggested it.
Yeah.
Each series, well, it wasn't every series. If there was somebody that they decided, well, we're going to do special, and we did a 1 hour special. The previous one had been Mountbatten before I was on there, and the one before that I think was Muhammad Ali, and I think they were the 3 1 hour specials. So maybe in others that I don't know about. But
there was some much later on.
Yeah,
much later.
Yeah, later. But that was, and so that was considered a big honour. And of course, Douglas Bader was like a real This Is Your Life. There's so much in it. And it was wonderful going to France to film and things like that, and standing, knowing the film Reach for the Sky, and I remember standing in the pigsty where he'd hidden, and I thought, oh, this is the real pigsty. I mean, it was fantastic. It just felt great to be in the place where Bader had been, because it was a real boy's own story. The only other name I know that's in the Black Book, and I don't know why, and I worked with her a lot, and I never asked her why, is Cilla Black. Somebody there had indicated that they didn't want to do her life.
And when you think about it, she's quite. I mean, I'm not an expert on all the names that were done, but yes, you would expect her to have been done. Wouldn't you, at some point? Because she's so well known.
Are you saying that you've seen it? I wasn't sure whether you were saying you thought you'd seen it. No. You may be right, but I don't think so. I'm sure she's the one name.
Well, she might have changed later, but maybe later.
Oh, later, perhaps. Yeah. Maybe Bobby didn't want to do it,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that does sometimes happen.
And he was, I just like him as well. I mean, I was lucky to work with lots of these people who were really
and you did, I mean, obviously I mentioned Tom O'Connor there, you worked a lot with, and of course Dickie Henderson.
Yeah.
You worked on him with lots of different work.
Yeah.
And you Eric Sykes, we showed earlier that you worked with as well. Was anybody you didn't work with that you really wanted to work with that you didn't?
Not really. I was like a jack of all trades, whatever. Whatever came along. We tended not to have it. It wasn't like now where lots of the ideas come from the people who push an idea. Then I was a staff director with ATV and got the jobs that were going, and I was considered like I was the up and coming, if you like. And so that's why I got like the Golden Shot, New Faces and Celebrity Squares. And then I decided to go freelance and left ATV and went to Thames, and that's when I worked with Tom.
And did London Night Out and Wednesday at 8.
Yeah.
I mean, not much of Wednesday at 8 survives, it has to be said. And I think Mark's probably run off at just the moment. There is. Perhaps you'll find us a clip from Wednesday at 8 as well. We talked to Mark as well. I mean...
You know who the choreographer was on Wednesday at 8 and London Night Out?
Well, it's probably Arlene Phillips.
No, which funny enough, there's a story about her. No, it was Nigel Lithgow.
Close. One of the two big...
Who then
big
reinvents himself as Nasty Nigel. No, but it's funny because Arlene Phillips took over. He got kicked out. His contract wasn't renewed because Arlene used to do the Hot Gossip with Kenny Everett. The Musicians Union took exception after a couple of series of the Hot Gossip miming. They danced to records rather than them being recorded music.
Sure.
They were contracted to Thames, but Kenny and the Mallets, I can't think of his name now, the director, producer. David Mallet.
Yeah.
Didn't want them to, he wanted either the songs by the original artist, he didn't want Hot Gossip singing the songs.
Sure.
We picked them up. Well, I was told to use them. And so Hot Gossip actually recorded the numbers for that series of Wednesday at 8. And it's really sad because, in a sense, because we just stuffed Nigel, and Arlene Phillips came in and did them. So she fulfilled her contract, got her money. And I liked it. I mean, it was good fun working with Hot Gossip.
It was a real hardship, wasn't it, really? Real hardship.
Well, it was a bit different to, you know, the flowery girls, and like the ones on the Dickie Henderson with, I can't think of the choreographer, because I was lucky to work.
Norman Main?
No, Norman Main he did the, well, that was in Birmingham, he did the Bob Monkhouse Summer Night Out, and the Night Out with him dancing around Birmingham. It's a historical document that now, isn't it? All the buildings that don't exist anymore, with Bob standing on them or dancing around them.
That's very true. So, I mean, something like Wednesday at 8, London Night Out, very much like the Sunday night at the London Palladium, but midweek, really.
Yeah.
Were they live? Were they pre-recorded?
No, they were pre-recorded. Yeah.
Because they gave the impression they were live.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, that's my thing. I mean, I think that's why I was employed to do them, because you did do them live, and one of the things I look at now is how many people, and I wasn't the only one. There were other directors who did live shows. There aren't many who could do a light entertainment live show now.
Absolutely.
But we did, and now it's a lot of post-production.
Let's have a little look at Wednesday at 8.
Welcome back to part 2 on our musical quiz, Name That Tune. I'm going to move, first of all, to our lady contestant on my right, Irene White.
That's right.
Hello, Irene. Now listen, you've got a funny story here, haven't you, about hedgehogs. Now this is funny.
Yes.
Anything to do with hedgehogs has got to be funny. Go on, tell us about it.
Well, my husband works nights, you say, and our next door neighbours came home one night and heard a very funny noise in our garden shed and thought we'd got the burglars in. So they came and knocked on the door and said, would you like us to go up and have a look?
And you said, hello. No?
No. So I gave Harold a torch and we went up the garden and opened the shed. And there was a hedgehog having babies, which she's proceeded to do every year since she comes back and has her babies.
Well, people don't even think about hedgehogs making love. How do hedgehogs make love?
Very carefully.
Very carefully. I thought so. Welcome to the show.
We used to do those in bulk. The Name That tunes were all done within a couple of weeks, and then we fit whichever one we thought was appropriate into a particular variety show.
I just love that jacket. I just want one of Tom and Connor's jackets.
I like all the glitter.
Absolutely. I should say at this point, before we go much further, that I mean, Paul is very much a man after our own heart in terms of being an art critic. I mean, that is a missing Wednesday at 8 show that we found in your collection, and we found quite a number of missing Celebrity Squares and other shows in your collection. So a lot of your contemporaries didn't always keep their work, but you had the real foresight to keep so much and also document the kind of paperwork side of it as well, which is fantastic. I think.
It's funny, isn't it? It's called archiving now. If I'd have been then, it was called stealing. I've got a golden shot, 35mm opening titles as well.
You see, I mean, I think you've probably got more in your archive than you realise, haven't you? Fascinating.
Yeah, I wish I'd got the Hot Gossips though. I had them on a tape somewhere, and I don't know all the 6 programmes that we did, and don't know what happened to them.
It may be able to prevent you, because I mean, you are kind of passing over to us now some tapes where you don't know what's actually on them, and that Wednesday at 8 was a complete surprise.
I didn't know what it was
to find that, so perhaps maybe we'll come across more along the way.
Hope so.
I think we should give a big clap for that, isn't it? Actually. And you went on to become director of programs at TSW.
Yeah.
But why did you decide to kind of leave the shop floor and go into management?
Oh well, that was a personal thing. I was in the newspapers as well for a while because my wife and I split up. She took 2 children, and that was a front page story as well if you archive it. And anyway, we separated, but I had to look after the children, and I had my 2 girls were away at school. I had 2 sons as well, and I went down to TSW first of all to do I think it was accompaniment, and I went down there to do, I think it was Mr. and Miss TSW, I think. Anyway, I got a relationship going down there, and a senior job came up, and I thought, right, I'll do that. I'll leave London and I'll have a base, because I didn't want to be in a situation where I somewhere along the line I might lose my children because I was, being a gypsy, and that was a personal choice. And so I went there as a director, then became head of features, and then became director of programs.
Presumably you still got, in such a small company, you still got the chance there to be very hands-on in what you actually did.
It did, yeah. The things that we did, I commissioned a series, an animation series called Tube Mice. Don't know if anybody ever saw that. And there was another program, Honeycomb Animation is the name of the company, they're quite big down in the southwest now, and they've done all sorts of other stuff. And Tutti Fruities was another thing I commissioned. They were children's programs.
Did you commission That's My Dog? Were you the person responsible for That's My Dog?
No, but I revamped it with Derek Hobson. That was already going when I went there. But I did do one of the things which I haven't seen it since I edited it.
Nighttime.
Nighttime.
I was going to show a bit later.
It's a very risque bit. I can't even remember all the bits that were in it.
We saw the semi-naked woman in the opening titles earlier when we were checking it through. So the whole audience will be out there now. I shouldn't have said that really, should I? But it was designed for late night.
It was. When nighttime television came in, I actually am a very literal person, and I thought they meant they want programs for nighttime, but they didn't really. They just wanted to carry on past midnight. And I got these researchers to put up lots of different ideas. I think in it we show somebody being tattooed. There used to be a guy walking up and down Oxford Street with End of the World or whatever. Was it? With Nuts Make You... That's it. Yeah. Well, we interviewed him. I don't know if that's on it.
Yes, it is.
But then there were strange things like there's children here, so you've got to be careful. I won't say. You've got to be careful who watches the program if you're showing all of it. And then was there a competition in there to check out, test? Would you know your partner's bottom?
I don't know about that part.
And I had a thing made with holes in it, so the people stuck their bottoms through, and the women had to decide which was, or one woman.
So you're doing OTT.
Well, and
in many ways.
But it was what do you call it? This woman chose the wrong person. She was horrified because what I'd done was got her husband to take his underpants off and put them on somebody else. And I can't remember, they were a colour or there was something about them that she thought, she'd got her husband. Yeah. You said OTT, did you?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember there was an act on that called The Greatest Show on Legs? Does anybody ever remember them?
The balloon dance.
Yeah. And they were a street act. And another. The trouble is, I did so many weird things. I did a show called the Mad Show, and it was a theatrical show in London. And that bombed, that lost a lot of money. But they were one of the high spots on it, and the Chris Tarrant people saw them and they booked them, and they went on to OTT. Yeah.
Let's take a few questions from the audience. We've covered a lot of ground there, but there's plenty more to do. Anything people would like to ask? Louis?
Yes, I knew him from Alpha and got on well with him, and It was as like an RTS dinner, I think, in London. And we went over there, ATV people had their table and Philip had his table. And I went over and had a conversation with him, and somewhere along the line I said something about, would you be interested if I went freelance? And he thought about it and phoned me up about a week later and said, come and see me, and I went to see him. And I remember going to a phone box afterwards, phoned my wife up and said, I'm going to be a temp. I was originally contracted to do the Mike and Bernie Winters series. I worked with them at ATV with Colin Clues, and John Hammond was contracted from the BBC. That's right. And so he was going to do it. Now, I don't know what happened, whether he said he didn't want to work with another director, but the next thing Philip said to me, would I do London Night Out? And so I then produced and directed, whereas I was going to direct. I think I did one Bernie show, Mike and Bernie. Sorry? Yeah.
Perhaps they split, perhaps that was the reason why it never happened. Yeah, perhaps Mike and Bernie split.
Right, yeah.
That might explain why one of them a divergence and you and everything so different instead. Any other questions? Neil?
Very nervous, yeah. I mean, again, he was a very nice man, very kind man, but he never really got into the being live bit. I mean, you felt sorry for him, but we worked with him a lot, and but he wasn't Bob Monkhouse. I mean, that was the trouble. Anybody that followed Bob finds out that it was pretty difficult.
Anybody you really wished afterwards you didn't want to work with again? Anybody you worked with once and thought, no, I don't want them again. I'd rather stick.
Not really. I mean, it's funny. The Eric Sykes is strange because we didn't really work together. I was asked to produce and direct the likes of Sykes, and but he was totally involved with it. If he didn't like something, he stopped it, and well, we sort of got on, but it wasn't a very good relationship.
Yeah.
I was the wrong sort of person really to work with somebody like Eric, and he would use his deafness. If you saw something that you thought, oh, he's not going to like that, and I'd say, oh, how about that? So we do another take, and if he didn't care, if it was say the dancers or something, which I like working with, he'd go, what? But if I'd say, oh right, on we go, and he'd say, oh no, can we do that again? If it was something he really used his deafness. And if you watch those This Is Your Life that Eric Sykes did, Eric Sykes is the only person who went on the right-hand side. The guests were always on the left-hand side next to him. He was on the right-hand side because his deaf ear was the left ear.
You learn something every single day you do. Any more questions?
Yeah, I mean, it's sad, but I think so. And because he was in the pantomime in Birmingham that year, and I don't know whether they cancelled it, but the bookings were way down because they would tend to do whatever the pantomime. Yeah, but I think he didn't really get a lot of help. I remember my friends telling me, and John might know more. He sort of turned up on the first day and nobody had done anything with him. He hadn't rehearsed, he hadn't done any... Alan... Well, I mustn't say because I'll probably get sued. I'm trying to think who the director was.
Fortunately, no one can hear you at all in here. It's just you and me talking.
Oh, right. Yeah. Is he? Oh, right. Right. The trouble is, almost all my contemporaries are dead.
Yeah, sure.
Some did, not most. Don't be cruel. Oh no, I'm saying they all had the answer. I briefed all of them. But what they didn't get was they were all briefed as to what the question was going to be and what funny response they would feel happy with. They might then argue about it, and then we would come to a conclusion and we maybe change. But they were totally briefed on that. What they weren't told about was the answer to the question, and that was because one of the first programs we did was with Diana Dawes, who I loved. I mean, worked with her so many. I mean, she was just so lovely. But the very first program that Diana did, she was asked a question, something about some Roman general, so that she could, some double entendre. And so she said, "All right, there, I'll do that. What's the answer?" I said, "Well, there's no way you'll know who the general was. I think you should say," and invented a name, or I might have said, what's his name, Mark Antony, or I don't know, some rubbish. And she said, "Oh, no, I won't. Just tell me, I'm interested who it might be." And she said, I won't use the name, obviously, because there's no way anybody would know that I'd know it. So I foolishly told her. So she's then asked on the show who was the general who did something. She did the double entendre, and then Bob says, "Yeah, fine, die, but what's the real answer?" And she said his name. And you can almost feel us all dropping dead, because there's no way she would ever have known who this remote, because the whole question was only put together for the funny. And so after that, we didn't tell anybody. And I learned that with Bruce Forsyth's wife, Anthea Redfern. We were always trying to get Bruce to do the show, and he never wanted to do it. And we thought, well, maybe if we booked Anthea, he would. So he came in with her, and he sat in the box behind me. And what happened on the briefing of that? She was asked lots of animal questions, and she said, "Well, look, I'm the president, or she was a patron or something of the RSPCA, I think." And she said, I really ought to know some of the answers, the proper answers. So I said, "Yeah, no, that's fair enough." And I told her complete rubbish. And so she answered all these, but she did it knowingly. Right, I know that. Bruce, I thought he was going to wet himself behind me. He thought it was the most hysterical thing, because she would say, Bob would say, "No, sorry, that's wrong." It's what? We learnt our lesson. So when they looked down, and if they did that too much, we didn't book them again, like Roger de Courcy, because he had Lucky going. That was another New Faces act. And he promised me he wouldn't operate it near the microphone. And all you could hear was clunk, 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 because the microphone was right next to him. And just the last story about him was that when I was going to do London Night Out, I went down. Dennis Kirkland was the producer I took over from, and I went to I think it might have been the New London Theatre then, and I was sat up in the audience just watching, how he put the show together, and I was going to do the next one. And Roger de Courcy came on to rehearse, and he looked up and he saw me and he said, "What's you doing here?" And I said, somebody must have said to my floor manager, he was taking over. He said, "I won't be working on it again." And we're like,
it's a great place to leave it. Paul, what can I say? It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.
That's hour and a half. Thank you very much for spending the time today. Thank you. We now have afternoon tea, kindly provided by the RNLA, so go and get yourself a piece of cake and a cup of tea, and feel free to queue up, ladies and gentlemen. Half an hour's break. I'm sure Paul will sign some autographs if you want him to.